Let me. I'll come to Sushant to take an answer about what Mr. Tanjan says, that this is a response to some containment strategy which India and the US might be doing together in tandem. But Anil Giri, you must have heard what Mr. Tanjan was saying. My question is this really the first time that the Chinese have gone public? Remember the last Chinese ambassador to Kathmandu, Hu Yanqi? She was so publicly engineering a government, if I could say. She was seen publicly to be saving the Oli government from falling, right, Anil Giri? So it's not that the Chinese have been softly intervening. They have been very hard at even government formation, etc. in Nepal.
So that is a very old story. As our panelist friend was saying, that I think he has not probably closely monitoring or following the developments in Kathmandu. First thing is that these issues which the Chinese side raised in Kathmandu recently are not associated with any boundary dispute between China and India. These are very, very fundamental issues between Nepal and China. And at the same program, one senior communist leader, he gave a very befitting answer. He told the Chinese leaders, you have promised several things in the past. You have promised to build the hydropowers, you have promised to build roads, you have promised to build bridges and tunnels and ring roads, and it is your job to carry out the development project that you have promised to deliver. You have to deliver. That's one thing, this is very important. The second thing is that India and US know. So it is not, I think India and US probably are not instigating to anyone to do this kind of things, because China and India, we have to live up. Nepal has to live up with both neighbors, India and China, quietly. But it is a prime minister, it is a minister, it is a government officials. We have been telling that please do complete your things on time. Please complete the project on time. So we have not executed a single project on the BRI. Okay. So it was the foreign minister who made a statement in the parliament. Not a single project under the BRI has been executed in Nepal. And a Chinese ambassador claimed that newly built Pokhara airport is under BRI. The minister said that no, it is not under the BRI. So there are certain misunderstandings between Nepal and China, and these kind of things are not instigated by anyone. So these are, this version, Chinese version,
exactly.
So Chinese version were totally, rejected and refused by our own prime minister, our own minister, and our government officials. There is no need to be triggered by any third party and any third country.
Mr. Tanjan.
Sorry, my friend.
There you go, Mr. Tanjan. It's not India doing it. It's not the United States doing it. Perhaps the Chinese are a little psyched out. As Anil Giri says, there are some serious concerns about Chinese projects which have been raised by the Nepali leadership, which have been left unaddressed by Beijing, and that's why a situation has emerged where, for example, on the Pokhara International Airport, the Chinese say, oh, this is BRI. The Nepali leadership has to come out in public say, for God's sake, this is not BRI. Same with the WeChat Pay. The Chinese said this is BRI, which it is not. So obviously there are protests within the Nepali leadership.
If I'm in your country, I have to go through your zoning process. I have to get permissions from your departments, and I have to be allowed to build. And what the Chinese are saying is, you want us to complete these projects, but you're not allowing us to do so. That's the frustration. I was merely earlier alluding to the fact that the relations between these three countries are not necessarily settled, and that includes Beijing as well as Delhi. So I don't understand, maybe there's some lack of ability to understand my English, but I thought I was very clear. I was talking about the general, and now I'm talking about particular. Two different points.
There's absolutely no lack of ability to understand English, Mr. Tenzin. The issue is that Hu Yanqi, and you are sort of papering over it. Hu Yanqi, the example I gave, she was seen to be openly meddling in government formation efforts in Kathmandu. And Chen Song, the present ambassador to Kathmandu from Beijing, he in September took potshots at India and said that India is not good for Nepal. So he was trying to create a wedge between India and Nepal. And then on that note, let me take this to Sushant. Sushant, you think China has got a little psyched out that in the present, India has fantastic equations in its neighborhood with Nepal, with Bhutan, with Sri Lanka. Forget the exception of Pakistan and Maldives. They have just sort of managed to almost steal an election based on certain promises which Chinese seldom keep.
So Abhishek, I think it's important to clarify that, our English is not as poor as Mr. Tangent would like to imagine it to be. And we understand when somebody makes insinuations that it was on India's prompting that the Nepalese started obstructing some of these projects, as though Nepal does not have its own agency. And I think the Nepalese are extremely proud people with their own agency and can take their own decisions. They don't need India to nudge them. Yes, if there is a certain project that comes up, India, as a traditional friend of Nepal, we will certainly ask, have you thought this through? Have you thought through the finances? Have you thought through of the time when you need to pay back? Because the Chinese are quite notorious for, putting their thumb on your neck to take out their money. We are seeing that with their iron brothers, the Pakistanis. The rest of the world is expected to make concessions to, Pakistan and give them some relief. But the Chinese don't reduce a single percentage point on the loans they have given or delay those loans or restructure those loans. They might roll them over, but very often they roll them over at higher rates of interest. The Pakistanis are so deeply in hock with the Chinese, they can't even say anything. So we would want to avoid a similar situation to happen to the rest of our friends, and because ultimately then what happens? When it comes to Sri Lanka, who is the first country which exerts to bail them out? It is India. It's not the Chinese. The Chinese, for the longest, stuck out and refused to do anything. It was only when they were shamed into doing something that they came around to agree to some debt restructuring. But on the larger question, Abhishek, which you raised, I think the problem with the Chinese is that, despite all the progress they have made, and that's a remarkable amount of progress they've made, and no quibbling on that. In fact, it's admirable what they've managed to do. And yet, the kind of pettiness which they display, the kind of small-mindedness which they display, and the kind of insecurities which these guys display, it's funny. For a country the size of China, with all the boasting which they do, the highfalutin logic which they give, and the perception which they have of themselves, they are so petty and insecure that it's amazing. And then they
really
fight.
Out of time,
One second, I need to make this point, Abhishek. He was accusing us of having a border dispute with Nepal. What about the fact that the Chinese are actually encroaching on Nepalese territory and then threatening the Nepalese that don't talk about it, otherwise we'll encroach even more? It's kind of strange. Chinese, very petty people, I must say. Very small-minded, very petty.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, Sushant, taking lessons from what has happened to Sri Lanka, wiser after the debt trap that Pakistan is in, Nepal is not playing ball, and the Chinese are really not liking it. That's why increase in the number of those delegations. That's why this hectoring and lecturing. I'm sure the Nepali leadership would have the wisdom and the depth to come out of this and take care of their country. Of course, India is there to help. Thank you so much, Sushant, for joining us. And of course, Ina Tenzin from Beijing for the China perspective. We lost Anil Giri there, but then we had a nice conversation and short break. Live and breaking on the other side. The debate is back tomorrow 9 p.m. Thank you so much, friends, for joining this evening.